The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tiny for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to Stroud once again. Now yesterday we saw Hunts Grove, which had a very suburban feel to it. Well, this is a different kettle of fish. This is very much villagey, which is the kind of place I like. Now, behind me there, you can see there's a lane just off to that way, I think. I can't tell which way my finger's pointing here. There's a lane there anyway. Now we're going to go down there at the end of this episode because out there's something called the Beacon, which we can walk to, and apparently it gives you a really nice view over the landscape. But before that, we've actually got to walk around the village first, and that beacon takes its name from this very settlement. Its name is Haresfield. Haresfield, Herse's open land. Continuing with our journey through Stroud, this week we're in Haresfield, a village with a storied past and a really good view, if you know where to go. Haresfield is 1 mile from junction 12 of the M5 between the villages of Brookthorpe, Harescombe and Hardwick. Occupied since prehistoric times, the village was almost certainly part of a Romano-British estate that ran up the road between Gleavham, which today we know as Gloucester, and Sea Mills on the Bristol Avon River. The Domesday Book mentions Haresfield listing 5 potters, which is a very unusual entry. The potters appear to have been based on the Milestone platform halfway up the Cotswolds slope, below what we now know as Haresfield Beacon. Over time, Haresfield village evolved into a scatter of farmsteads and clusters of cottages with a footpath network leading to the church. There was also considerable areas of pasture and orchards, and Haresfield has a reputation for producing cheese and cider of the best quality. With the building of a railway station in the 1840s and the construction of associated buildings such as the pub and housing for staff, the village expanded towards the site of a cross, where a flagpole can be found today. The 20th century saw Haresfield develop into a dormitory village with people travelling to work. However, it remains busy here because it has a school, a pub, many working farms, and there's even a stonemason. So, there's a lot to see here in Haresfield, isn't there? Let's get the walking boots on and go. We start with the village hall, halfway down Haresfield's main street, just south of Beacon Lane. A central meeting place and hub for community activities, this is run by the Village Hall Committee, which works to maintain and improve the building through fundraising and grants. Free Wi-Fi is available for all users of the hall too, which is a bonus. Now, there isn't a lot of history available about the building, but at a guess I'd say it's 1930s or maybe earlier. That's purely from experience elsewhere. Whatever the case, it's always been a significant building within the village. Parish council meetings take place here, and speaking of which, the hall has the parish notice board. That means we can get Haresfield marked off right here and right now. Let's head south now down the street towards railway line and take in some of those fabulous Gloucestershire dwellings as we go. So the house in that last shot there is the old post office, which is a village amenity that has seemingly disappeared, although I think there is potentially a newer post office somewhere up there. We'll see when we get all the way around to that point. If that one's gone though, one amenity that definitely is still here is the local pub, and it's behind the camera. Let's check it out. This is the Beacon Inn, which has quite a complex history. It began life as a railway hotel and was even called that when it was first built in 1854. Responsible for its construction were the Midland Railway. They opened it as a rest and retreat for passengers on the Midland Railway line, which passes through Haresfield. Although trains still pass through the village today, they don't stop, meaning as a hotel it ceased to function in 1965. However, now it's the village pub, after being adapted to serve tourists and walkers. Inside, its walls are decorated with pictures, including historic images of Haresfield. It even has a claim to fame, sort of. Not long ago, famed singer-songwriter George Ezra stayed here. Haresfield is not exactly Budapest, but I'm sure he enjoyed it. The Beacon's current landlord and owner was recently given the go-ahead from Stroud District Council for a building adjacent to the main hotel, which will contain 5 accommodation units for extra guests. After the pub, the road ends, but we can carry on walking. To do so, we have to cross the railway line. The light was green, so let's get moving before a train comes. They are quite frequent here. The line you see before you is the one that connects Bristol to Gloucester, although services to Swindon also use an adjacent set of tracks. Haresfield once had a railway station, which figures, seeing as all those guests for the station hotel would have had to alight somewhere. Haresfield Station opened in 1854 as part of the Bristol and Gloucester Railway. It only served the Bristol and Gloucester line and had no services to Swindon. Shame really, I quite like Swindon, as you may already know. Haresfield never provided any freight facilities and it closed to passengers on the 4th of January 1965, along with other stations on the Bristol to Gloucester line. Today, the 4 tracks have been realigned and no trace of the station remains. However, I can at least show you where it was. Access to the station was off this rather nondescript looking lane that runs parallel to the railway today. Next, we need to cross a field using a footpath. This runs in a diagonal fashion across some parkland and ends up at the church. This area was magnificent, but don't just take my word for that. Well, I'll tell you what, it's definitely a world away from Hunts Grove, this, isn't it, last week? Haresfield's a beautiful place, and you know, this lush, verdant, green landscape is always what I imagine when I think of Gloucestershire. Might just be because green and Gloucestershire begin with the same letter of the alphabet. I don't know. Anyway, once you've got over this footpath and over all this greenness, you're heading towards the church. You might be able to see the spire of it just there between those trees. That is our next landmark. The church, which is dedicated to St Peter, is apart from the village itself and accessed by a public right-of-way that shares a private drive. More on that shortly. The first reference to a church in Haresfield came in 1161. Although this isn't that building, there are traces of that church here today, including a restored window in the north choir and the north doorway with its medieval oak door and tympanum. The church was rebuilt in the 14th century. Most of the visible interior dates from 1842, with further reordering in the 1890s. St Peter's sits in the centre of a beautiful and peaceful churchyard away from the village. Notable features include its lead font and medieval dugout chest, originally used to house records and money. It also has 2 14th century female effigies and wall monuments to 3 generations of the Rogers family. The church clock, given in 1692, is believed to be the oldest working clock in the county. Just north of the church is the Mount. This is a moated site which may have been where the earliest Haresfield settlement was. This is likely, given that it's right next to the church. Part of the moat forms the northern boundary of the churchyard. The enclosed area beyond is believed to be the site of a fortified dwelling of the early lords of the manor. Nobody knows this for sure though, because weirdly, the site has never been excavated. The relationship between the dwelling and the church suggests that the original building may have been a manorial chapel. There's an information board that tells you a little about it and how it may have looked many centuries ago. Well, I don't think there's any doubt really that the Mount is definitely one of the best mounds, medieval mounds, we've ever seen so far on TVI. And you can just imagine, can't you, a residence being on top of that hillock with a moat around the side of it. Now, speaking of big houses, that's kind of what we're heading for next. Haresfield Court is the next landmark. Haresfield Court stands on the drive that leads to the church. Originally named Moat Place, it was built in 1676. It was converted to flats in the 1980s. Grade 2 listed, this is easily the grandest property in the village. It's a former country house, the core of which was down to John Rogers. Since then, it's been modified a bit. It was refronted and enlarged to the east by Francis Niblet in 1869 and enlarged to the west in 1893 by Waller & Son. Haresfield Court is mostly ashlar with a stone slate roof and small brick and tile sections to the south. Now we need to cross back over the railway line to complete the circuit of the village. This means passing some lovely thatched cottages and a flagpole where a village cross would once have stood. Enjoy! This is Haresfield School. It was established as a Church of England school in the 19th century and then rebuilt in 2007. The old school building still stands next door, where the offices are located today. That means this school has the best of both worlds: modern, well-designed facilities and history right on its doorstep. Now, despite the fact that there's a carving of a hare on the gable end of the old Haresfield Primary School, there is no connection between the animal and the village name. It's probable that the name is instead a corruption of the Anglo-Saxon landowner, Hersa or Harisa. Now, the school is very fortunate in another way. Children here are able to use the massive playing field that's next door. This is the Merryfields, used by Haresfield School as a playground and sports field, and by the Haresfield Gladiators Cricket Club. It's also a popular spot for neighbours to meet. This is Haresfield's biggest public space, which is kept by a board of 3 trustees, one who represents the school, one who represents the church, and one who represents the parish council. In all, isn't Haresfield just lovely? Here's one final montage before we get back to the start. Okay, we've made it all the way around the walk, and this here is Beacon Lane, which I mentioned right at the beginning. Now, if you drive out there, you're heading towards the Haresfield Beacon. It's about 1.5 miles away and still just within the parish boundaries. Let's go and pick up the car and see what the view's like up there. The light is starting to fade a little bit now because it's starting to become quite late in the day, but to be honest with you, it should still look okay. Okay, we've driven up the hill towards the beacon, and let me tell you, it's really steep up here. So, to get to the beacon from here, we have to walk through that gate over there and follow the footpath, and hopefully there'll be a great view when we get there. Haresfield Beacon is a long way up into the hills above the village. It's a steep old climb this, but it's well worth the effort. This path is rocky underfoot, but navigable with care. Thankfully, it's not too long. From the road, this only took me 5 minutes to get to the summit of the beacon. We're on part of the Cotswold Way. Wow, this makes the Derbyshire Dales seem like child's play. I was out there the other day climbing some pretty steep hills, but this one is a lot steeper. I'll tell you what though, it's a cracking view, and I'm not even at the top yet. Check that out. Beautiful. Haresfield Beacon measures 1.8 acres. It's more than just a hill, it's a geological site of special scientific interest which was first notified in 1985. The site was formerly called Haresfield Hill and is considered a classic when it comes to Jurassic rocks. It includes the Cotswold cephalopod bed of the Upper Lias and the Sissom beds of the inferior Oolite. I'm not a geologist, so I'm sure those terms mean something to someone. Its most important significance is its rich fossil fauna. But there's more. As well as being a pretty good place to come for studying rocks, historians are all over this as well. Haresfield Beacon is a Bronze Age long barrow that was part of an Iron Age hill fort. In fact, the area has an even richer history than that. In 1086, the Domesday Book mentioned 5 potters based on the milestone platform located below Haresfield Beacon. The potters were active from the mid-11th to the early 13th centuries. Pottery shards found here have also been noted in places such as Bristol, Hereford, and even Dublin. In 1837, Roman remains were found in the area. This again included pottery, but there were also animal bones and a rotary quern. This suggests that the Iron Age hill fort was used as a settlement during the Romano-British period. Most people come up here though for the absolutely breathtaking views the beacon offers. Now the weather's not particularly brilliant today. There's a haze over the countryside at the moment, so you can't really see a lot, but even so, this view is still magnificent. Haresfield Beacon is absolutely worth the effort going up that steep hill fort, let me tell you. Now I'm not going to stay here for too long because there are some rumbles of thunder in the distance, so I think in a few minutes it's probably going to rain. So yeah, I'm going to go back to the car and we'll wrap this episode up. Isn't this just beautiful? In fact, actually, you know what, before I go, I'm just going to give you another 4 or 5 seconds looking at that. I can't take my eyes off it. To finish with, I drove back down the immensely steep-sided hill that the beacon is on. This is a narrow lane and it's not the easiest task. You have to be careful not only of vehicles, but also walkers who are heading up here to the beacon. There are a few houses along here, by the way. They're scattered along its length. Wouldn't it be great to live in a place like this where you could just wander up the hill whenever you felt the urge and admire the English countryside? See you next time, folks. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.